Welcome to Reinventing Broadcast, where AI meets content. Hosted by Ben Anker. Let's dive in.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show, the Broadcast Media Inside Track. Today I've got a new guest. This is Russell Trafford-Jones. Hello, Russell. Introduce yourself, please.
Hey there. Thanks for having me here. It's good to be on the show. And my name is Russell Trafford-Jones, and I'm pleased to come here and have a chat. I've been in the broadcast industry for a good 20 years, and so there's lots of things I like to talk about. And got a bit of a technical hat on. I work for a company called Techex that specializes in moving live video. That brings me into live production in a number of different ways. And so, that's kind of where my brain starts. But I like everything from the glass of the camera all the way to the glass of the display device.
Wow, amazing, right. And I understand you've got a very keen interest in something called DMF these days. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
What is it? Is it a latest acronym for everyone?
Well, what is a week if there's not a new acronym? It's good to it's good to add to the list. What we always need to be doing is looking forward, looking to find out how we're going to do things differently. And that's not because we're restless, but constantly there are things we need to be doing, and it's usually more with less money and more outputs, and there's nothing like social media to bring that to the fore, where particularly news organizations and people who produce sports, but really anybody like in soap operas, etc., to an extent, you've always got to be delivering your content to multiple platforms now. And so that means you've got to do more. That's just one of the drivers. And the other types of drivers are business mergers and acquisitions and all this kind of stuff. And people are saying, well, what is it that will help us on the technology side to do that? And what our journey into cloud has taught us is that not only is it a nice relief for someone else to be looking after the computers and the OSs and the air conditioning, but when we are forced to use software only, we suddenly find we have a lot more flexibility. We have that option of being able to move things around in ways that you can't do with kind of hardware or dedicated appliances. So you can still buy boxes nowadays which have got software on, and that's all they've got, and it's just a computer. But what this idea is, under the banner of DMF, is to think, well, what if we didn't have any barriers and there was just some software floating around effectively, and it doesn't matter where it was. But imagine if you could do that, then all of a sudden you'd be able to do really quite different workflows, and you'd be able to do things more flexibly. And usually that means there's a way of making it cheaper. And
right. Okay. So, like, how do you define 100% software media facility? Is it like literally no hardware at all, or is a minimum hardware footprint, for example?
Well, the point is not that there's no hardware, but there's just computers, and nobody cares what the computers are effectively. So as a vendor, you wouldn't say, yeah, you got to buy my computer, and I've tested 3 of them, and here you go. You would just say, this is the software, and off you go, right? So if you think about it more like a program for Windows, there will be some requirements. You can't run something that needs a lot of processing on something that hasn't got processing, but there's no real requirement of what goes under the Windows operating system. You just get on with it. And so if you buy big servers, and they'll be able to do a lot of thinking, and if you don't buy big servers, then they won't be able to do as much. But the point is that rack of servers that you can own, and or you can use the cloud, can be much more efficient because you can literally just turn things off, put things on, and really just work in the most efficient way possible. It takes a lot of thinking to get it to get it into that situation.
Yeah.
But that's the goal, and it's a big goal, but we've had big goals in the past in the industry, and we've met them, but you don't meet them without starting and without some early adopters.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned like some of the benefits before, but what about the challenges? What are the key technical barriers? I'm thinking like interoperability is probably something that might still
Yeah,
be.
well, there's interop, but then there's also just managing it. Right? It's all very well
Yeah.
saying, "Yeah, I'll run up like 6 converters here, and I'll do something with a load of software over here." But who's pressing go? Who's saying now's the time to do it? What's the
Yeah.
orchestration mechanism? And as you say, how do you make it so that each company's software does the right thing at the right time? And if you think about all of the other solutions that you've seen on like desktop operating systems, there's normally some sort of platform, isn't there? You've
Yeah.
got, you could think of Steam, or you could think of plugins for Premiere or OBS or things like that. They've got standards behind them, just like for Chrome extensions. So there's always something that you have to do. And DMF, the Dynamic Media Facility, will finally tell you what it means. Is the idea of how do we make it so that there is some interoperability.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
the IT industry has done a great job of making amazing networks, of creating containerized ecosystems like Docker.
Yeah.
So we can leverage all of that, and then until we run out of tools to make our workflows, our media workflows, particularly live media workflows, work. And so those are the bits that we need to build. We need to build those things
Yeah.
that understand what media is, and allow you to operate your workflows.
Yeah. And like I'll have to be careful of my acronyms again. But it's not MXF, it's MXL, is it? That's
Mm.
the central plank to this. What is that?
Well, if you think about a system in layers, a bit like the OSI model for networking, where you've got
Mm.
the bottom layer is like the physical hardware, and then there's another layer on top of that with Ethernet, which just tells you how to get it from one place to another. Then there's another layer where it's saying how you get it from one building to another. That's IP. That's all great, and the point of having things in layers is that the IP bit doesn't have to care what the copper is or the fiber. Those are independent, and
Yeah.
so we're using that same idea here. We're going all the way up. We've got Docker, we've got things like that. But what is this? What is the way in which we can move media, live media in particular, from one place to another? And there isn't
Yeah.
an interoperable way of doing that. There's a very easy way of doing it. And if you're on the same computer as me, then I press Control C and you come along and you press Control V. What we've done is
Yeah.
we've shared that bit of memory. I've put something into memory, and then you've taken it out of memory. And that's
Yeah.
exactly the way that computer programs can work on the same computer. So if
Yeah.
I put in 6 frames of my video into memory and I tell you where it is, then you can go and read that out. So it's almost trivial in one sense, but it hasn't been done in a way which is open. And so we've got companies like the BBC who are interested in DMF, who are there saying, yeah, we want these like 5 or 6 companies to work together, because together that's a really good system. But
Yeah.
everybody's sharing stuff into memory for their own purposes, and they're not saying how it's done. So MXL, the media exchange layer, is the first step to having a uncompressed, effectively zero latency way of sharing video and audio and metadata
Yeah.
between processes on the same piece of kit at the moment.
Yeah. Because I'm just thinking of like, back in the SDI days, basically, and especially Techex works in purely IP now. What's the change? What's the benefit of moving to IP in terms of remote production, live production, those sort of things?
Yeah, well, it's hard to put any kind of one reason behind it. Sometimes it's really basic, and that is that it's cheaper because you're not running your own system, and so you want to be able to do stuff in the cloud. Sometimes, like the Cloud MCR project at IBC this last year. The reality is your source is in the cloud and your destination is in the cloud. So, why are you trying to bring stuff down to the ground just to, I don't know, decode it, shuffle some audios, re-encode it, and put it back up again? Right? It's not practical. And so, because there's loads of stuff in the cloud, then people naturally want to be able to have that option. The companies like ITN, who use the cloud as a DR system, it's good. It's pretty handy to have a whole production system that's ready to rock and roll, no matter what bit of your infrastructure is taken out for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So there's really basic stuff along those lines, but each time I find that each time people are moving wholesale, it's usually due to a big fundamental motivation. So one of the big pushes into IP networks for live video production was simply the scale necessary. No longer was it practical to have SDI routers big enough, at the size needed to deliver the studios at the scale they needed. I know that was one of the motivations for Sky News when they rebuilt their studio a number of years ago. They first went IP. But increasingly, I've seen the scale, the number of channels, either now that we've got all these mergers, there's some splits coming up. You're now managing hundreds of channels, possibly 1,000. And that scale really doesn't make sense without software. And certainly to date, it's made sense in the cloud. And Sky also offer now a playout service for third parties, which they wouldn't have done otherwise, because they've got cloud playout, so they can just scale up another channel or two. As long as someone comes along and pays that delta, then everything's good. They don't have to over provision. They don't have to kind of buy 3 servers and hope they get 10 clients. They can just you can just scale that up. So. And I guess the last example is with the Sky Sports Extra. Is that what it's called? I can't remember. I might be wrong, but I think it was last year or year before they launched a whole new service where they increased the number of the amount of events they covered by 50%. But that was only possible because they were able to scale up just for those events into the cloud, produce a live event in the cloud. You watch it, everyone turns it off, goes home. And that is not a proposition that could have happened, certainly not without increasing the subscription costs previously. So yet that gives them a leverage to say Sky Sports is better, right? Because we're giving you more. So they've literally done more by using that. And I would say it's not more for less, but on the other hand, it was really good value. And certainly if they can prop up their whole subscription proposition with that extra good value content, then I think everyone's a winner, clearly.
Right. Yeah. And I'm just thinking, if you're a sort of media organization, or you're thinking about sort of migrating this stuff to more like a software centric model, what's the sort of fundamentals, the building blocks? What's the first steps that you'd sort of recommend or go through with them?
Well, it's hard to say really, because it's early days, right? The whole of the dynamic media facility idea is new, it's fresh, it's had a few years percolating, and it's finally starting. So as you've said, MXL, which is one of the first steps, that's now a live project that's been developed in the open on GitHub with an assortment of vendors throughout the industry. And then there's a joint task force set up between EBU and AMWA, who are going to come together and start work on creating the rest of DMF, which is mainly orchestration and understanding things about timing. That's always the hard bit. So all of the MXL stuff that I made sound simple is made really hard when you start to make sure you've timed it right. So I think the main thing is to keep on top of that, right? Follow
Yeah.
what's going on there if you don't want to be part of it, and make sure that you as an organization are able and ready um, to deal with software, which means knowing how to use containers. It means having scripting or infrastructure as code, automated ways of deploying things, whether that's
Yeah.
perhaps you want to do that and learn in the cloud, but at some point you need to learn how to do that out of the
Yeah.
cloud.
Okay. And I guess Techex is already software centric anyway, so I guess you're going to be the cheerleaders, the champions of this stuff, right?
Yeah, well, what we've found is that it's a nice little relationship. We kind of lead our customers towards new technologies, and they lead us to some new technologies, and together, it's actually a really exciting and kind of progressive bunch of conversations we have throughout the year. And because we work with some of these media organizations, multinationals particularly, who are really motivated to maximize the efficiency, they're usually the first to be chomping at the bit to try and implement these new technologies as they come along. So the cloud became a thing for probably the third or fourth time during COVID.
Yeah.
But and that did accelerate a lot of things. But even then, the maturity, the way, the approach that the organizations came at the cloud that we were working with, I was very surprised. It clearly
Yeah.
was something I've been already thinking about and designing, and so similarly here, when we can start unleashing the power of MXL first, which will be over the next 12 months, and then increasingly other layers of orchestration and things like that with DMF. I'm sure that we will be able to be some of the first people to get it up and running.
Oh, yeah, amazing. And lastly, I guess, are you riding the AI wave, Russell? Is there any particular use cases you've seen recently that's caught your eye or implementing?
Well, I'm always looking out for use cases for a specific reason, because I think that AI is it's a bit like having obviously a superhuman. And so if you can think of something that a human does, then presumably, eventually, if not already, the AI can do it. And what that means in media is that understanding or documenting anything in the image or the audio is effectively done, right? It might not be done very well, or it may be awesome, but for me, that is exactly what AI is supposed to do. So I'm more interested because I'm just assuming, that's done, right? And if it's not done, people will do it. What's more interesting for me is where we can get AI into some of the things which um, aren't about the content. So you've got the tooling. Obviously, it's nice to have AI build you a workflow or something. But then I also wonder, is there ever going to be a situation where AI will be helpful actually in the path of video? So if you've got video coming from a stadium into a broadcaster, again, we're not looking at the video, but that's got to go through a whole load of processes. It's got to go. It's probably going over SRT over the internet. It's got to be
Yeah.
encoded. Other exactly the same, either in the cloud or in the broadcaster, and then it's got to be routed and go through different places. And you've got an MCR who's going to be making sure that nothing goes wrong during the program.
Yeah.
Is AI ever going to be part of that? And I haven't seen a lot of movement there, and that's where I'm most interested. It's hard to do things frame to frame. You've got like 20 to 40 milliseconds to do anything.
Yeah.
So realistically, what's going to happen? I don't know. I
Yeah.
can't think of what it would be. And then there's routing decisions. Perhaps that's useful,
Yeah.
but they're not that hard
Yeah.
already. So again, it might be driven by scale. So it may
Yeah.
be that an organization that needs something to babysit 400 channels may choose to do something which is 80% efficient and then have an overseer, rather
Yeah.
than today's method of of doing that directly with humans who also make mistakes. Well, taking things off air too, but
Yeah.
I like to think that I do a pretty good job overall.
Yeah. Yeah. because I always think, text and audio is, easy more easy to deal with than video. Video is a bit of a beast. But yeah, I'm sure it will mature, and we might see that in the future. But yeah, for now, it's been great having you on the show, Russell. Thanks for coming on.
It's been great. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to Reinventing Broadcast. Subscribe for more on AI content and the future of media. And visit ancast.tv for more info on Ben himself, the resources, other content, and news.